Good evening, everybody. So glad you could join us this evening. We did an impromptu, or are doing an impromptu question and answer, dealing with our sessions because we've had questions sent to us and comments made to us, and we're going to just take a few minutes as we get into this and look at some of these comments, questions, answers, for the purpose of hopefully, and God willing, just getting you more involved into the subject and searching and looking and doing research. Again, let me point out something here this evening as we get into this. I stated this from the very beginning. Everybody, especially in our church and those who know me and whatnot, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm a pastor. I do have a degree, but it's related to biblical studies and Middle East history and whatnot, but it's not relative to this. But that does not mean that you or I cannot be a thinker. That means that we can't study, we can't research, we can't know things, we can't understand processes or can't understand complex ideas. We may not know the intricacies of biochemistry or what a physicist does or whatnot, but we can get the basics and the gist of things, and we can use our minds and we can use our heads to reason out or reason in certain things. So that's where I'm coming from with this. What I've been doing this whole time is this, looking at the reasonableness of our faith. And when I say faith, let me point out again, as we get into this, we've been looking at and doing this series, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And probably the number one comment that I receive and have been receiving is this: you don't need faith to be an atheist. You don't need faith to not believe something. Well, that's I think maybe a sticky point on the definition of what faith is. I looked it up again today, what faith is. And faith is simply, it means trust, confidence, commitment, generally to a concept, to a person, to a thing. So the question we opened up this series with was looking at, where do you place your confidence, your trust, your commitment? Where does it lie? What concept do you hold to? So yes, as an atheist, even as a person that does not believe in God, you do have faith. I've said it many times, and I think I've angered people by saying this on some occasions. I believe that evolution is somewhat of a religion. It does have certain tenets to it. It has certain commitments to it. It has certain elements to it that you don't stray off the path. You don't go, off on your own lane somewhere. You have to stay true to that commitment. So there is a belief that you hold to. There's a commitment that you hold to. As a creationist and as a person that believes in God, and I put my faith and my trust in Jesus Christ as my Savior, I do admit that I have a faith in that. I do have a commitment to that concept, to that idea. So there's certain tenets related to faith. There's certain tenets related to what we believe, and we all believe. We all have a worldview. The question is, what do we put our trust in? It may be this concept, it may be that concept, it may be this tenet or that tenet, but whether we believe in God or not, we put our trust in something. It may be nature, it may be science, it may be yourself, it may be, fill in the blank there. So that's where we're coming at to answer that first question in saying I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. What we're saying is in this series is that a lot of what's taught related to chemical evolution or biological evolution It takes faith to believe that. It takes commitment to believe that. You have to trust in certain concepts where there is no, taste, touch, feel, sight, hear. It's just not there. As well, as God, the same thing is true. But we put our faith in that thing, whatever that thing may be. So hopefully that opens up a little bit to that. Now, the other thing I do want to comment on as we get into this for the next few minutes, for comments and questions that I have received, and on the most part, thank you. Thank you for your civility. Out in the social media, biosphere, I don't know, troposphere, internet sphere, whatever you want to call it, out in that world, it can be brutal. People can troll, people can, the first thing they want to do is start calling names and saying that, thank you for your civility. What we're trying to do here is just talk about this stuff and get you to open up and receive, to get you to feedback with me and us so that we can do the same, look into certain things and ideas and concepts as well. So we're not afraid of that. We're not afraid of the hard questions, and we're not afraid of, if we're wrong on something, changing our mind about something. But we are looking at the fact of reasonableness, and what we've been looking at is the reasonableness of our faith, particularly, more specifically, what I'm relating to is Christianity. Now, as we go along in the series, and I know this is question and answer, as we go along in the series, we're actually going to get into some things, and it does take faith as you go along, and we're going to see how this buttresses into that as we move along from the foundation of truth to the foundation of beginnings. We're going to look at and get into miracles, and then we're going to get into the New Testament and looking at what makes the New Testament different than any other historical book known to mankind, or gatherings of writings known to mankind. And I think it's going to be pretty fascinating as we get along into that. So thank you very much for your civility and for just being quote nice about some of these questions. And again, I don't propose to have all the answers. I'm just going to do the best that I can. If I don't know, I'll say I don't know. Certain things that have already been presented to us or to questioning, related to this session, these certain questions, I've had to say, you know what, I never looked at it that way. I haven't seen it that way. I need to do some more research and study. And some of that we're going to get into as we go along and as we learn together, if you please. So thank you again. I do know that from some questions or comments received that you have not watched the previous sessions starting from the very beginning. That would be a good idea. Or you didn't even watch the entire video or session that we went through. I do know that is the case because of the way that the question was phrased or the comment was made. It would have been answered, or at least you've got the gist of it if you would have. So I do encourage you to get a better understanding of where we're coming from, to watch the whole thing and to look at the whole thing. So let's look at, as we get into this, there's been the question of chemical evolution and origin of species evolution, or what we would call biological evolution. They're two different things. I've had a couple of people ask me that, or tell me that they're a little bit confused on what we're talking about on some of the things that we've gotten into thus far. We need to understand and differentiate the fact that there is origins of life studies, and then there's origin of species studies. And I did that one just for an easy way to remember it. I think origin of life studies or origin of life science, you have a big O, little o, and then a L, and then origin of species, I went big O, little o, S, so we know the difference. The difference is this: origin of life science would be the chemical process. Where did the actual first life come from? As some have stated and some get into, you're looking at the primordial soup idea. That's where the chemical reaction came from. Billions of years of raining on rocks, certain temperatures, lightning strike and whatnot, and then boom, you have life that's created, and out of this primordial soup comes, ultimately life. That's what I mean by, and I'm just using that as one illustration. We're talking about chemical reaction, chemical processes, and chemical evolution to the cellular and molecular level. The Darwinian evolution, what we're dealing with there, the OOL is the chemical processes, chemical evolution. OOS would be origin. I just did that for origin of species. That would be biological evolution. That's where once life is already here, then you've got evolution that goes from one species to the next. You see adaptation, you see natural selection, you see all of these different processes in this evolutionary stage. So we're looking at two different things just to help you understand that, and or hope you can understand it from those two different perspectives. So you have beginning of life at the cellular or molecular level, then you have the biological evolution, which is speciation, change, evolution through natural selection, and other processes. But then let's add on to that. Let's add on creationism. Now, what we say as a creationist is this, that we believe, and I believe, that life began with, in the beginning, God, and then when God spoke, which is a way of saying when he moved in his power, life began. He's the one that started the life process. And this is where the big question comes into play. See, Darwin in 1859, when he wrote Origin of Species, he's not looking at the origin of life. He doesn't go that far back. He doesn't go into that per se. He's looking at just the natural aspects in the animal world. And whatnot. So we're kind of looking at, well, when God created, what did he create? Did he just create the cosmos? No, he created life as well. So speciation, change, evolution through natural selection and other processes is biological evolution, and then beginning of life at the cellular molecular level is chemical evolution. Creationism says that through special creation, God did it, okay? Naturalism says, no, we don't believe God did it. We believe if you give something enough time, enough chance, enough tries at it, enough startups, and millions or billions of years, you will have the probability of life beginning on its own by accident from a non-living thing. And this is where the chemical process of chemical evolution, what it represents. You're looking at something that is now, quote, living, came into being from something at one point in time was not living. And through chemical reaction, that mixture, if you want to say it that way, caused life. We're just saying that through the processes of special creation, God did it. So we lay the cards out on the table with that. What we've been saying is, and been asking is, what's reasonable to believe? And as we go along, hopefully it's gonna pique our interest to do some study on this. Look at some evidences on both sides and just lay it down and say, hey, I like this, I don't like this. Does creation need faith? Absolutely, it needs faith. Does chemical evolution need faith? Yes, it does. Does origin of species type of evolution need faith? Absolutely it does. And when you study both, you're going to find out why, particularly when you read those who publish articles, that publish writing, even peer-reviewed articles and whatnot. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, maybe even last week, you're going to find when you read origin of life science studies and read papers that are written by individuals and men and whatnot, you're going to find that you see phrases like this. we suppose that, we think that, our theory is, or it's our belief. Yeah, our belief. It's those kinds of catchphrases and buzzwords, which is a way of saying that, we really don't know, but this is what we project. This is what we, believe will happen. This is what we expect to happen. This is our interpretation, whatever it may be. So you're going to find that, and I would ask you, as you begin to read and you look at some of this material, look for that type of content in the article or in the book that you're reading and whatnot, because you're going to see that an awful lot, because they're saying that this is where we don't have evidence. This is where we don't have a gap. This is where we don't have answers. And last week or last session, I read off, I think, 25, 26 names of scientists, highly regarded scientists, that are believers. They're believers in God. When I say that, believers in Christ. And I actually think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to put together an exhaustive, if I can, an exhaustive list of individuals that are believers in God and whatnot, and scientists. There's a lot of scientists, folks, that when they look at science, they see the hand of God. They see how marvelous God is. They see how wonderful creation is. They see how fantastic this thing is that they're looking at. And it's pretty fascinating to know that you're not alone in this. You get the idea out there, particularly when you talk about intelligent design and creationism and whatnot, that if you believe that, and quote, Christians believe that God created and whatnot, that they've just went over the edge. They've lost their minds, and they're, quote, believing in blind faith. And by the way, let me point out, believing in Christ and Christianity is not blind faith. Blind faith is me sitting in a cardboard box and believing it can fly. But faith evidenced by facts is what we purport. Is there evidence that we can build our faith upon? I believe an airplane can fly, not because it's plastic and metal and glass and has engines and whatnot, but because it was designed to do so. Therefore, I have the trust, the faith, to believe that that thing can fly, because the evidence is there. It does what it does. So this is what we're looking for. What makes our belief system as strong or not, per se. And maybe some of us need to work on getting some more answers related to the God of this universe and to creation. And my prayer is that those that have never even looked into this, those of you that have always just said, well, science has all the answers. Science does not have all the answers. Or science science is God in my life. Well, my question would be, how about stepping over a little bit and taking a chance and taking a challenge to look at it another way? And before we jump into some of these questions here tonight that's been sent in or have been commented on, I want to give you some recommendations, okay? If you're interested in going a little bit deeper, a little bit further, and that's why we're doing this, and you're interested in a little more heady, little more heavy content, and this really puts the fire underneath of you to know more about this. And I've always said, don't believe me because I say it. Don't just accept what anybody ever says just because they say it. Do your own research. Start looking at certain things. Start looking how certain things may or may not have been portrayed or been shown to be, or been taught or whatnot. Don't believe a professor just because a professor says it. Don't believe. One thing that I have found out, particularly on chemical evolution and looking at processes of chemical evolution, and this would be from the first guy actually that I'm going to mention here as a recommendation, James Tour. He purports this. He's a scientist. He's in some crazy science. I mean, this guy, he's a Messianic Jew. He's a believer in Christ. Go online and look him up. James Tour is his name. James Tour has done one that I know of, that at least that I've listened to, and he has done at a conference a talk called "Origins: The Mystery," or what is it? The Mystery of Origins, or "Origins: The Mystery of Life." James Tour is his name, Jim Tour, and he's a science, particularly in nanotechnology. I think he's in a chemist science. He's in the world of writing articles and papers and publications and peer-reviewed information and whatnot. When he talks, he doesn't get into, and he doesn't go into, I believe this because of God, or I believe this because of Jesus, or I believe this because of the Bible. When he speaks specifically from a scientific knowledge base and science knowledge base, and that's his platform. And he'll tell you that from the beginning. He'll say, I can give this particular talk in front of any room full of scientists in the world, anywhere, and I'm not bringing God into it, and tell me if I'm wrong or right. And that's what he does. And he's a believer, and he's fantastic. James Tour. He's not even an intelligent design proponent. Okay, if you've been studying any of this at all, he's not even into that. He says that he doesn't give any positives or negatives to that. That's just not his thing. But he is a scientist that deals with chemistry, and this guy is just phenomenal when he breaks it down as to the complexity of chemical processes and whatnot, and looking at how that there's pretty much zero probability in life coming into existence on its own, by itself, even with time, even by accident or probability. It's just not there. But go online and listen to him. He also did a debate with an individual, Lee Cronin, I believe, or Cronin, Lee Cronin. He's a professor at a college outside of Houston, and I forget what university it's at. But anyway, they do a debate online. Go watch that. It's very telling, and this is where you can see an individual who's a believer, individual who's an atheist, but they're congenial with one another. They have niceties towards one another, and they discuss the complexities with one another, and it's pretty fascinating. So James Tour, number one, I recommend that you look up any of his stuff. Michael Behe wrote a book about 25 years ago called Darwin's Black Box. It's older, but it is good, and you need to get that if you don't mind spending the bucks to do it. Stephen Meyer wrote a book. This is a book you're probably gonna have to read once, twice, three times to get the concepts in it, but it's called Signature in the Cell. And he's a believer. He's one of the foremost leaders in the country of what's called intelligent design. Intelligent design is basically stating that we're as a believer, but what he's saying is that we're not even going to say God, we're not going to say higher power, we're just going to say that, what we see and what we see evidenced in the complexities of the cell and molecules and DNA and RNA and all of these things, all these chemical propositions, and through what's considered evolution and whatnot in the processes, what we see is intelligence. What we see is a mind doing this thing. So Stephen Meyer, Casey Luskin. I'm just going to say go online, look him up, and read some of his material. Casey Luskin is his name. Fantastic articles to help you do a dive or get a dig in with this. And then lastly, let me mention Ben Stein. Ben Stein and this is just real simple, he did a DVD a number of years ago called Expelled. And this is a DVD that is related to individuals that they may not have even been a believer. And some of them are not. They're not Christians. They're not believers. But what they've done is they've stepped off the boat, and they've asked the question. Maybe it wasn't this kind of evolution. Maybe it wasn't this type of evolution. Maybe it wasn't this process. And let's just ask questions and bring it to the table and open our minds up and whatnot. And you'll see in Expelled where he's saying they've been blacklisted, blackballed, they've not been allowed tenure, they've lost their jobs. People saying, oh, scientists wouldn't do that. That doesn't happen in science and whatnot. No, folks, when you're committed, when you have a faith system, a belief system, and to a thing, and in that particular vein, and it's there, all kinds of evidence online, look it up, you'll see where individuals have been pretty much shut down because they were willing to take a step off the path, start asking questions related to design, related to God, related to something outside of naturalism, and boom, they lost it all. So that's why I say that's a faith, that's a commitment, that those that had the power to do that to these individuals, they stayed in that faith commitment, and they said, hey man, if you're not gonna stay, quote, in this faith with us, then we're gonna move you on. So yeah, it's really there. So this is where we need, and the question to be asked is why would it be, if you're questioning, if you're contemplating questioning, God versus evolution, God versus naturalism, God versus humanism. Why would you be, quote, blackballed or not allowed to pursue your career in a particular science or field because you just didn't toe the rope or, go the way that you're expected to go? All right, so that's Ben Stein's Expelled. If you have never watched that, look it up, download it, buy it, do whatever, and take a look at it. It's pretty fascinating. All right, let's go to one of the comments and questions that we've seen, and it's related to hydrothermal vents that prove origins of life. Hydrothermal vents. Back in 1977, I believe it was, they were discovered, and what they are pretty much is they're generally found next to volcanoes in the ocean, and these hot water vents that are under the seas and whatnot. There are belief systems that say, hey, we can prove by hydrothermal venting, and because of what we have found there related to chemical processes, life can evolve. Maybe this is where we came from. We came through the process of hydrothermal venting under the sea, because we know in the evolutionary narrative, what's believed is that somehow, some way, we came from the oceans, and the oceans eventually produced us to the point to where we're at today. Just making it real simple, and it gets into a belief, it gets into a commitment to these things. Now, what I wanted to show you and talk about this, because someone has mentioned, well, we know that because of hydrothermal venting, the processes of life could have started there. A lot of people say, we know because of what we find there, this is most probably the way that it did start. And some believe that this is where it all began. Now, this is an article written by Rachel Brazil. I think she had this published actually in several scientific journals, but this is just because I've seen it in several different ones. But this is in Chemistry World, 5/15/2017. And this is how she starts this out. Debate rages between biologists and chemists over whether life began on land or under the sea. Then she looks at some of the arguments. And I'm just highlighting some of this. Get an opportunity to look it up. The question, how did life begin, is closely linked to the question, where did life begin? Most experts agree that when 3.8 to 4 billion years ago, but there's still, quote, just what she says, there's still no consensus as to the environment that it could foster this event. There's one of those phrases, there's no consensus, which is true. But not everyone is convinced that life started in the sea. Many say that the chemistry just won't work. And they're looking for a land-based birthplace of life, with several hypothesis in play. The race is on to replicate the conditions that allowed life to emerge. The first deep sea hydrothermal vent was discovered in the East Pacific Rise mid-oceanic ridge named Black Smokers. And then she goes on to explain what that is. The vents are formed by a process known as serpentinization. And I'm pretty sure it's because of the way that they're formed. They're formed like a snake. They form from, rising and scrolling upwards, if you please, or forming into a sphere or, quote, snake shape. And they create white calcium carbonate chimneys 30 to 60 meters tall. Investigating hydrothermal vents, geochemist Frieder Klein from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in the U.S. discovered a variation in the origin story, the deep sea origin story. He has found evidence of life in rock below the seafloor, which might have provided the right environment for life. This is some of those buzzwords, catchphrases. And then in the article, she says, David Deemer of the University of California, Santa Cruz in the U.S., has been studying macromolecules and lipid membranes for over 50 years. He comes to the field from a slightly different angle, which some have called membrane first. But he says, now listen to what he says here. I'm pretty sure that the best way to understand the origin of life is to realize that it's a system of molecules, all of which work together just as they do in today's life. The location comes down to a plausibility judgment on my part, he muses. Now, do we understand what he's saying there? He's saying it's my judgment that this is plausible. Again, what we see, and you're going to find out when you read the articles, you read the books, you see the textbooks, whatever, you're going to see this all over the place where a person says, I think that, or I believe that. Of course, this is one other possibility, or there is one other possibility. That now these are just pieces out of that article. Go read the whole thing. That life, and you're going to find this, I can't begin to tell you how many times you're going to see this come up when you look at the origins of life science. Go online and just do a cursory review of it. You're going to see this come into play over and over again. If you watch the Expelled video with Ben Stein, you're going to see Richard Dawkins bring this up, okay? The life that didn't, there's one other possibility, that life did not start on Earth at all. Panspermia. The theory that life was seeded from space seems eccentric, but not everybody counts it out. An argument can be made that life actually began on Mars. According to Deemer, because it was the first to cool down to temperatures that could support life. So through some form, fashion, way, whether it was, dust from the planets, if it was from meteor strikes, if it was whatever it may be, it got to Earth and life was seeded. Do we see where this is going? Folks, do you see any faith involved in some of this? People that believe this kind of thing? Do we see where there's a commitment, to where there's a trust? Now, you're not saying God. Some go as far to say it was aliens that did it. Aliens somehow came to the Earth. Maybe they accidentally crashed to the Earth, whatever, and boom, here we are. That's straight out of Scientology, man. But this is the length to which they will go. I read something earlier this week. I'm trying to remember exactly where it was at. It had to do with 33 authors. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it was a peer-reviewed article, 33 authors pretty much. It was related to the Cambrian period, the octopus and the squid and whatnot, where they're saying, a lot of scientists kind of laughed at it, a lot of them, rejected it, but these were scientists and they were peer-reviewed and they were published, and this is, they're basically saying because of the complexity of an octopus and its eye and its biological structure and chemistry and all, that aliens crashed on the Earth and it may have been a seed from an alien or whatever. Do you see where we're going with this? Do you see where there's faith involved with some of this, where there's a commitment to some of this? Aliens from space? Yes. God, no. Now look at this. An argument can be made that life actually began on Mars, according to Deemer, because it was first cooled down. Whether this is the case or not, life elsewhere is certainly feasible. Jupiter's moon, Europa, Saturn's moon, Enceladus, are candidates because they both have oceans beneath icy shells. Pretty fascinating, is it not? I would say so. Now, the idea of chemical reaction at the hydrothermal vents, the idea of chemical processes, finding the answer to origins of life. There's a word for this. In evolutionary biology, the word is abiogenesis. A-B-I-O, and then the word genesis. And it means the negative biology, B-I-O. So it means that life sprung from non-life. So you have the negative non-life that produces life. Abiogenesis is the word that's called, or informally, the origin of life process. But what I wanted to get onto this, what really made this, I guess, get its kick in the rear end to really take off and go, because when asked about this, the difference between the two, chemical evolution and Darwinian evolution, you find that there's an experiment that pops up again and again and again. It's in textbooks, it's taught about, it's talked about, the Stanley Urey experiment, or Stanley Miller-Urey experiment. In 1952, go online, look. In fact, let me show it to you. I've got some notes on this. This is actually, I printed it out. This is the Wikipedia. Made it real simple. This is the Wikipedia illustration of the Stanley Miller-Urey experiment, and make it real simple. But do some research on this. What he was trying to do was adding certain chemicals, trying to find out, can we produce life and whatnot. But one thing you're not taught, one thing that's not brought up generally, is that he did some things in the experiment that needed outside force or outside powers or outside intelligence to make it happen, relating to the elemental processes of what they believe the earth and elemental beginning stages of the earth at the beginning, what they believed. You have these certain elements, and the problem was Stanley knew this. When you read about this, you're going to find out that oxygen is the enemy. Oxygen is needed for life, but it's the enemy of chemical processes. And what Stanley did, go online and read about this. He built what's called a trap in his contraption, because he knew that he had to trap these chemicals in that trap, and that he had to do certain things to the experiment to try to get the amino acids that he was trying to produce. Take some time to read about it and see what happened. But when you find out the truth about it, I'm just going to take all of that to the end game, to the end point. It's used, and the reason I'm pointing this out, because it's used all the time, is that this is an experiment that helps us to see that chemical evolution is possible, and because of this type of experimentation, we can get to life and start life, and basically what he did was produce poison, and he knew it. That's why he put a trap in. He had to do certain things to even get what he got, and what he got was not good. You don't hear that taught. They don't talk about that so much in the textbooks, and they don't reveal so much about that. Maybe they do now. I can remember reading about this. I didn't know much about it at that time when I was a kid, and certain things related to this subject and whatnot. But It's just something for you to look at and dig a little bit deeper in understanding the origins of life science and what it's trying to do, and to the lengths that it will go to try to, and again, I believe, to sidestep the thought of God or the process that God was involved. What is more reasonable, to believe in certain processes that man can come up with and try to fill in the gap there, or is it easier to believe that life began, by God and at creation? In 1992, Stanley Miller, and this is the reason I brought up this particular, we were talking about hydrothermal vents, and volcanic heat in the oceans. In 1992, Stanley Miller in Discover magazine says this: the hydrovent thermal idea is a loser. And he made the comment, why are we even talking about it? Now, this was from Stanley Miller. What he's saying is that what you see on the ocean's floor and what you see happening there on the ocean's floor, we can't get a consensus. They're just because you find an element, just because you might find something related to chemical evolution, doesn't mean that it creates life or everything there is necessary. All the pieces of the puzzle are there necessary to even move forward to creating life. And again, listen to James Tour in his talk on mysteries of the origin of life. Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute, if you've heard of that. The SETI Institute is the institute that that has the big radar or not telecommunications, the sound communications, to try to detect sounds, I think, from the cosmos to see if there's life, in outer space and whatnot. So, and I forget what SETI stands for. But in the magazine Life Science, written by Denise O'Leary, this is what he said: finding clues for life from its earliest moments is tougher than overcooked roadkill. But the article goes on to say, and this is where we get into, folks, commitment, trust, belief, confidence in, yet it happened somehow. Now, in the article, when you look at some of this stuff, when you see there's already the commitment to evolution. So since you already have that commitment to evolution, therefore, all of the answers have to come from that worldview. And if you think about it this way, your worldview is the glasses that you put on. This is how I see everything. And so when I put these on, I'm going to do it according to the worldview, according to my trust, according to what my concept of trust is, and according to what my belief system is. So I'm going to put this worldview on, and everything I do is going to be related to the way that I see through that worldview, through that commitment, through that faith, if you please. And a lot of this you're going to find out is related to faith. Scientists have proposed various external sources of energy that may have triggered reactions, including lightning and radiation. One of the beliefs is that lightning, somehow there was some type of energy that was needed at the primordial soup and stage, and had this where it needed energy from, and it created these molecules to form, and at the cellular molecular level, or eventually into the cellular level and whatnot. It just this is where it all came from. Other approaches focus on understanding that there's a catalyst in chemical systems on the earth that might have provided the precursor molecules necessary for self-replication. So they're saying it had to begin somehow. It has to start some way. So for life to have begin from nothing, you need that intermediate energy. You need that intermediate power. You need that intermediate process, whatever it may be. So this is where we fall. This is where we fall into that concept of confidence and trust, what is it going to be? So let's go to another question. The first question was, does hydrothermal venting, volcanic activity in the heat registers in the ocean prove that life existed, and this is where it could have come from? It doesn't prove it. The question would be, is there a lot of controversy surrounding it? Absolutely. Even among scientists. There's no consensus on it. There's no one saying that, we have found, we found the deal here. Not so much. So anyway, just to let you know that there's a lot of research to be done in that area. The number 2 question would be this. Well, the fossil record, the fossil record proves that evolution. Now we're going from chemical to biological or Darwinian evolution. Okay, so the fossil record proves that Darwinian evolution, is true. Not so much. There's first of all, understanding the fossil record. The fossil record is not, quote, set in stone, if I can say it that way. And what evolutionists believe about the fossil record is this, that the oldest sediments have the simplest forms in them. So the further down you go with the simplest forms and whatnot, you're going to find that as you get higher in the strata, you have more complicated forms. So that shows you that because of the simplest forms below, it's millions and millions of years stacked, the strata of the earth is millions of years. As you get to these strata levels, this is where you see the change of life and the evolution of life and creatures. And, you go from simple celled creatures or whatnot into eventually, you get mammals or whatnot. So I agree that the fossil record, and one person said, we don't get all the answers from the fossil record. We don't. I agree with that 100%. And you can only derive from what you know or what you don't know from the fossil record. But is it set in stone that the fossil record proves from the simplest to the more complex that that's always the case? The question would be, does the fossil record, definitively show level upon level upon level, simple to complex, that evolution occurred? It does not. Number one is because we don't get we don't get the fossil record in one place from top to bottom or from bottom to top. You have places in what's, quote, called the fossil record. Stephen Jay Gould, if you look up what he thinks about the fossil record and the tree of life, he has a problem with getting the tree of life from the fossil record. I'm just going to throw that out there. And if you don't know who he is, he's the biologist from Harvard. As much as he was, he wasn't a Christian, he wasn't a creationist, but he's honest in a lot of areas and related to evolution. And he would say, hey, we don't have it. It's not there. It's not there. So if you read up on what he has dug down into, and he has a problem with, quote, the evolutionary tree and the fossil record and whatnot. And but what do we see? We do see, for example, what's called polystrate trees in the strata in the fossil record. Polystrate trees are trees that you would see that are embedded from this layer to this layer to this layer to this layer. Go online, you can look it up, you can see them. And now remember, if each level of strata, and you can drive down there, you can go through West Virginia, Colorado, you can go through Arizona, wherever it may, and you can look at the side of a mountain, and we've all probably seen them. You can see these layers of strata that are in the sides of the hills or the mountains, particularly if they've cut a road through. You can see, one layer upon another layer upon another. At one point in time, that was wet. It was like mud because of the way it was laid. And you'll see strata layers. Some of them will go, they'll be rolling straight, and then they'll do a taffy turn, they'll roll over and they'll roll back and they'll do like this. That was done through a catastrophic event. In That's a whole nother area that I'll get into related to the biblical flood. But you can see that had to have been at one point in time, because rock doesn't bend, right? Okay. That was laid down while it was still wet and pliable and soft. And these strata levels, though, according to the evolutionary theory, states that there are millions and millions and millions of years stacked on top of each other. Well, these trees that are embedded in these strata, if you've got millions of years here and there's a tree, and then you've got another layer of millions of years, and there's a tree, another layer, millions of years, a tree, another layer, millions of years. Are you telling me that that tree existed for, millions or billions of years, and it became fossilized over time? After the first layer, it would have rotted and fallen off. How did that tree get there? And this is all over the planet, folks, where these trees are laid. They're also in lakes. They're stacked straight up, vertical in lakes. They're not laying down. They're straight up and down. And it looks like that there was, some type of massive force related to water that swirled these things. They got, boom, embedded in mud and covered up. And we see them. We can see coal miners have dug them up, digging for coal, and you see where they're laid. They're laid in these strata. So you can't always say just because the strata is there that what's in that strata is related to the truth of the fossil record. Okay. Now, there's a reason that I'm saying this. I want to read to you. This is from Gary Parker, who is a professor, biologist, university biologist, former evolutionist, I want to say, I don't know if he was an atheist, he was an agnostic, but he was, as a young man, he struggled with what to do with this, and eventually, he came to the creation, to the creation side, to the side that there is a God. I want to read to you what he says concerning a class that he was taking. And again, let me point out, as a reader, I'm a thinker, and we all should be. We don't have to be a scientist, a biologist, a chemist, or whatever it may be, to get a grasp on something. We can use logic and reason and understanding to come to definitive terms, and read what other people have said and written. We'll get the understanding, okay? May not know the technical part of it, but when we read the bottom, you read the summary, you read the conclusion, you read, you read between the lines, you'll get the concept, okay? Listen to what he says. Misplaced fossils are common enough that evolutionists have a vocabulary to deal with them. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out, remember I talked about the trees? Well, you'll find out, for an example, in the Cambrian period, the question was asked related to the fossils on the lowest level to the highest level. You'll find out in the Cambrian period that they call it the Cambrian explosion, and they call it the explosion because they all appear. So it's like, boom, they're here. These fossils that are in the Cambrian period, they just appear. And there's different types. There's not just one type of fossil in the Cambrian period. And you find that in fact, I was reading one place, they found dinosaur footprints under the strata that was holding dinosaurs. Okay. Now, do we get now, if the fossil record was true in every account, in every stage, in every phase, what's in the ground under the earth, then you've got dinosaurs before you've got dinosaurs. Understand what I'm saying? Doesn't mean the dinosaurs didn't exist. I believe dinosaurs did exist. The question is going to be, you can't just say, they were only found here, and therefore that means, no, why is there footprints of a dinosaur here when we find dinosaur bones here? Now, this is what he says. He says, misplaced fossils are common enough that evolutionists have a vocabulary to deal with them. A specimen found too low in the geologic column. Now understand this, what he's saying. It's not supposed to be there, that dinosaur footprint, okay? It's too low, not supposed to be there. He said before it's there before it was supposed to have evolved, is called a stratigraphic leak. So it leaked, okay, into that strata. A specimen found too high is called reworked specimen. Often, of course, there's an actual physical evidence for mixing of strata from two different sources, but sometimes such evidence is lacking. With such a handy vocabulary available, it's quite likely that the number of misplaced fossils found without evidence of disturbance is far greater than the number actually recorded, which is considerable anyway. Sometimes whole geologic systems are misplaced. Listen to what he says. While I was a graduate student in stratigraphy class, still trying to decide between the Bible and evolution, we went on a field trip to find the missing 25 million years of the Silurian. We went to a quarry in southern Indiana that was famous for building quality limestone. The massive gray limestone was quite thick and exposed over many hundreds of yards. In the lower part of the formation, we found corals belonging to system number 2, the Ordovician. But we worked our way up to the quarry wall, suddenly began to find the Devonian corals, those belonging to system number 4. Then he asked the question, where were the missing corals of system number 3, the Silurian? For an evolutionist, that's a crucial question. Evolutionists believe that Ordovician corals evolved into Silurian corals, which evolved into Devonian corals. Skipping the Silurian would break the evolutionary chain, and for an evolutionist, that would be impossible. What was there between the Ordovician to the Devonian corals in that limestone quarry in Indiana? Only millimeters separated them, and there was no change in color, no change in texture, not even a bedding plane. There was no physical evidence at all for those hypothetical 25 million years of evolutionary time. As the professor emphasized, such a situation is a serious problem for evolution. We simply can't imagine land just lying there for 25 million years, he said, neither eroding nor depositing, then picking up exactly where it left off. Evolutionists have coined a term to deal with the problem, paraconformity. Then he says this, in the case of paraconformity, there's no evidence of erosion, nor any other physical evidence of break in time. Only the fossils are out of place. The name even means that it looks like a conformity. In fact, the only way to recognize a paraconformity is by prior commitment to the evolutionary theory. There is no physical evidence. If you believe in evolution, then you must believe that there was some gap in the sequence, or else the evolutionary chain will be broken. Now, do we kind of get the idea of what we've been relating to and what we've been talking about, of having a belief, commitment, confidence, trust in something when it may or may not be the case? And this is the whole concept of what we've been getting at. So hopefully we've answered a couple of those questions for you. I don't know if we have any more. Amber, do we have any more? I don't know if we had any more there related to that. Now, I did have one person, and thank you for being very, very nice with this. And I'll spend more time on it if we get another question and answer session going on. Because someone had brought up the fact that there's a very long looping laryngeal nerve in the neck of a giraffe. Humans have it too. Richard Dawkins and others, and this individual brought it up, stating that for it to be long, to go down, to loop around through the aorta and back up and whatnot, it just seems like a waste of nerve. It just seems like a waste of anatomy, and it's why is it there? And it's poor design, and it's used as an illustration of very, very poor design in the giraffe and other things. By the way, let me point something out. I've done a little bit of reading on this, and I have to be honest. I told you, if I don't know something, I want to say I don't know. I've done a little bit of reading on it, uh, and I can see where evolutionists look at that, and I can see where creationists look at. And there's creationists that do say, hey, it does have benefits, and when you see it from this perspective, you see benefits of it. And some would say that, from this perspective, why is it there? As a believer in God and God creating, the question would be, do I think that God got it right? I think so. Their question was, you brought up the giraffe and you emphasize, and they pointed out, we emphasized on we talked about the giraffe, but we also brought up, other related insects or whatnot, related to the complexity of their creation and whatnot. But the giraffe was pointed out as being emphasized on. As well. This particular nerve, I've got a couple things here I want to read to you. And I want to do a little bit more research on this. Okay, a giraffe illustrates an extreme example of the required length of the left recurrent larginal nerve. Yet the system functions very effectively. Many other complex design features are also needed to create the famous long giraffe neck. Then he says, then they say this, another reason why this nerve branches, both of which branch off at the vagus, are located both above and below the larynx, is that the design allows some preservation of function if either one is interrupted. The redundant pathway also provides some backup in case of damage to one of the nerves. Now, I do want to point out, in the past, we were told, and when I was younger, it was common to do this as a child, getting colds and sore throats and whatnot. They took my tonsils out. Tonsils weren't needed, and it was a, quote, a proof in evolution that, it's a poor design, and they were just ripping tonsils out of kids. Unless there's an infection, there's a problem with them today, I don't think they take them out, just to take them out. But it's been found out, folks, that tonsils are needed. There was a time and a place where, if you remember the tailbone, they were saying, the tailbone, poor design, you don't need the tailbone. And well, we have found out, folks, in evolution, and it teaches, and I think some still teach that the tailbone is not really so much necessary and whatnot. The tailbone is necessary. I promise you, it's necessary. It is, you remove your tailbone, you are going to be in a world of hurt. The tailbone has a lot of specific function that you really, really need, and that's as far as we'll take with it, related to your tail. So you need the tailbone. It's not a vestige that's just, there was a time we used to have a tail, and our tail has shrunk, and it's the remnant, and it's the leftover, and we don't have it anymore, and we don't need it. No, not so much. We need it. We need that tailbone. So some saying you don't need this long nerve and whatnot. What I'm saying is that what I'm finding out is that there are others. There's always going to be, this is, I guess, one thing that I'm getting to. You're always going to have left side, right side. You're going to have positive, negative. You're going to have, look at both sides, and looking at both sides, ask the question then, is it reasonable for this? Is it reasonable for that? Does it make sense for this? Does it make sense for that? And, ask yourself, why? Why, if the question comes up, why is this there? Why is it not there? What should it be? This is all, and the whole goal of what we're doing, I just want people to not just accept what you hear from one side or the other side. Get into your own. Look and see, can I present a case for this? Can I not present a case? Can I look at both sides? Can I be willing to open up? And some of the recommendations that I gave at the beginning of this, I challenge you, listen to them, read them, look at them, get into looking at some of this. If you come away from it and say, not for me, so be it. I can remember a time before I believed, in the sanctity of life. I believed that, a baby was just a globular of gel, and that a woman, it's not a big deal. You lose a baby or abort a baby or whatnot. You just, that's okay. You'll make another one. You can do it again. No different than making a pancake. Until I understood, being fearfully and wonderfully made, and you really see in the embryonic stages of and the growth of a baby in the womb and whatnot, when you really get a picture and you can really, we know way more now than we knew 30 years ago in looking at the stages of development in embryo and seeing the miracle of life that's there. So yeah, we just weigh our options, and are we going to change our mind about something? There's nothing wrong with changing your mind about something if you're going one way versus the other. And this is the only thing. My conviction, and I've stated at the very beginning of this series, is I believe in a creator, and I believe in special creation. I believe that the evidence points to the fact of special creation. Let me continue to read on here just a little bit. The redundant pathway also includes some backup in the case of damage to one of the nerves, getting back to the giraffe. Last, several studies found that the existing path occupies a relatively safe position in the tracheoesophageal groove between the trachea and the esophagus that renders it less prone to damage or injury than in a more direct route. Now, one thing that I looked at also in reading about some of this, I think I've got it here in a note. The giraffe embryo lacks a neck and lengthens as does the human embryo, only much more because of its neck is designed to be much longer than in humans. Consequently, it moves the RNL down with it as the neck lengthens. So what these scientists are saying concerning the nerve in the neck of the giraffe is that it's it's necessary in the embryonic stages and the growth of the giraffe in the way that the neck is formed and shaped and whatnot. So anyway, we'll get into more of this as we go along in our questions and answers. And I don't know if anybody sent anything in, Amber. Okay, I didn't know, but that's a few of the questions that we received related to this series. We're going to pick back up this coming Sunday at 7 o'clock. No, 6 o'clock. I'm sorry. At 6 o'clock this coming Sunday Eastern Standard Time, we're going to pick back up on. We're going to look at DNA. Again, we're just going to look at some of the complexity and it's just amazing of the information and what the DNA does in the cell. But we're going to look at that and then move into completing. And we'll look at that real quick, and then we'll get into, and I think next week finish out on the argument of morality. And I think we'll do all of that next week. And the argument for morality is this: where did it come from? If there's a God, did he give us the ability to be moral beings? Or is morality, if we're just chemical reaction, if we're just fizzy, if we're just random chance and circumstance? And that's why we're here. Where did morality come from? Why do we have morals? What put it there? How did we get that? What's the purpose of morality? Because we can get to the with lack of morality, we can't get to the idea of, what's true for you is not true for me. Not only that, what's right for you is not right for me. Not only that, you cannot judge me for what I do versus what you do, because, hey man, I'm just a meat machine and this is what I do. Or are there moral constraints related to our being? So we're gonna really take a few minutes this coming Sunday evening to take a look at that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you very, very much. Again, if you would like to contact us, we have the information in the description. If we get something that's that's obscene or just trolling, I promise you we're not going to respond to you. We're not going to talk to you. But if you're seriously asking questions, or if you're seriously trying to show me something or talk to me about something, hey man, let's do it. But let's be civil about it. We just want to be there for you, and hey, if you're there for me too, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord, I want to bless your name tonight, God, because I recognize that this may be for someone that's listening a time and a place for the kingdom, such as this right now, right here. Maybe there's someone out there just searching, they're looking, they're trying to find purpose and reason for their life, and God, they're looking to know that we're not just a bag of fertilizer. God, we're when we die, is there life after death? God, my prayer tonight is that more than anything, that there would be a search for truth, and that truth involving knowing you, creator of this universe, which I believe that as magnificent and marvelous and powerful and transcendent as you are, you're mindful of man, in that you came to live in us. And Lord, I pray that someone that's seeking, someone searching, they'll just open their hearts and say, God, I want to know you. I want to know you. I want to know you better. And I ask it in Christ's name. Amen.